It was the middle of the night when a sound woke Etan up. He was annoyed to have his slumber disturbed. He wasn't sure what it was, but he thought it was a loud thump. He got up and threw on his robe, muttering to himself about punishments the culprit would receive. Once he got to the door, he opened the slot that let him see into the hallway without opening the door. He could barely make out the pair of Ratriac guards that flanked the door. "What was that noise?" he demanded, but neither guard answered. "Answer me!" But still no reply. Etan closed the slot and opened the door. "I said answer me or I'll send you to the pits!" He exited the room and turned to look at the guards. "Well, answer me!" It was then Etan realized they'd never answer him. Both guards were gruesomely dead with their throats slit and blood all over the walls and the floor. It still dribbled down from the wound and down their chests to pool at their feet. In his shocked state, it took him a moment to wonder how they were still standing. That is when he noticed the thin but strong wire wrapped around their necks. The wire cut deeply into their flesh, and Etan followed it up to the access hatch in the ceiling. His head whipped around as he looked for danger. Then he went back into his room, slammed the door, and locked it. He looked around for his sidearm, but it was too dark. He flipped the switch for the light, and that is when he saw the steward's head. It was impaled on one of the bedposts. He started to back towards the door when he came up against something solid. He felt another being's breath on his neck and a hand pulling his head back. "You should have listened to the slaver," was spoken into his ear before he felt a sharp line of fire across his neck, and he struggled to breathe. And then he slipped into darkness. Author's note: I'm sure some of you will recognize a certain historical person. It didn't start out that way. Just trying to get from point A to point B ended up being more influenced than intended. I added this in case some wonder why I left some parts of his tale out. Hopefully it is still enjoyable. "Come on, Smith!" yelled Hirth as he stood by Cole. "4 more, let's go!" Cole was stuck trying to lift himself again. Pull-ups were not his forte, but that could be worked on. "Anomaly, David," Gavi spoke up from the communicator on David's wrist. "I have the information you requested." "Go on," David said back. "Anomaly Cole will need to at the least be able to close his hand with approximately 184 pounds of pressure," Gavi said. "If it helps, I can measure his current point by having him use the pulling equipment." "In a bit, he has to finish his set. He has 3 more to go," David said as he looked quickly at Cole and by extension, his team go through their daily workouts. A necessary precaution. On this ship, the artificial gravity is only about half of Earth's, and that meant they needed to work out a far bit. Not as much as the early years astronauts, but still more than the average human on Earth or any colonies might. David was currently at the bench press, having been spotted by Samantha, not that 145 pounds was hard or heavy on this ship. "So David," Samantha said, helping in racking the weights, "why is Hirth training Cole like he is a rookie?" "You wouldn't believe me even if I told you," David said back, wiping at his arms and forehead with a towel. "Try me," Samantha said back in a daring tone. "Well, do you remember Zaf?" David said as he formulated how to explain this whole mess. "Yeah, he is an idiot, but has started to hang out with Maya a lot. Kinda sweet," she said back. "Well, Kiga wants Cole to be her Mishra, and for him to take part in her coming-of-age ritual," David said carefully. "Problem is Cole, and he needs to be able to tighten her armband." David leaned back. "An armband made out of Xanfurium, one-handed." "Oh, wow." Samantha stared out at Cole. "That's not going to be easy, but maybe in a month or 2. "He has a week," David said, "and I still need to make sure he can pronounce his part of the ritual." "And if he messes up?" "Well, from a traditional standpoint, if he fails to tighten the armband, they would kill him and Kiga. If he messes up his part, Kiga would be expected to kill him. And if he fucks up both, then war may be declared," David said as he switched places with Samantha. "There is a reason that even the ambassador is meant to reject any request to participate in Xandranfane rituals." "That's a problem. Then why are you agreeing to Kiga's request?" Samantha said as she finished her first set. "She has me in a tight hold. The mission must be completed, but to do that, we need the Xandranfane pack on our side, however. I may have pissed off or hurt their pack leader," David said as he watched Samantha start her second set. "So if he fails, what's the outcome?" Samantha asked. "I'll find out soon. For now, it is more of a family meeting thing," David said as he glanced over to Cole, who has been moved over to a deadlift by Hearth. I can tell you this, I'm thinking about filling Cole in properly and maybe the others. Not like they can turn back now. David stood next to the wall, looking away from Cole, as he butchered his way through Xandrais. To David, it was a horror show, having witnessed the ritual. Nif argam gutval kiga noe alaris hincarno ver alaris hincarno malvard ki marfi. David turned around and snapped. Cole, how is it that you only got the names and the word me right? David, this is a whole new language. I barely understand why you're teaching me this. Cole snapped back. If I told you, you will stop focusing. Now from the top, David said, taking a deep breath. Nif ergim gitvel kiga noi alaris hincarno ver alaris hincarno malverg ki marfal mishra Cole Smith. That is another thing. Why is my name in there? Cole said, cutting in. Cole, David yelled. Look, remember when you first met Kiga? David asked, well past the patience he normally held for the engineer. Yeah, Cole said as he rubbed at the 5 scars from Kiga on his first day out of ISO. I said that she will be having her coming-of-age ritual soon, David said. Well, turns out Kiga wants you to take part in it. Oh, Cole said. The weight of the task seemed to finally dawn on him. That's a big role, isn't it? Massive role, David replied. I'll put it in simple terms for you. Even the ambassador hasn't been asked to partake in this ritual. Shit, so I have to get this right, Cole said, his eyes narrowed as he concentrated, before starting again. Nifergem gitvel kiga noe alaris hincarno ver alris hincarno malverg, ki marfal mishra Cole Smith, gaim killa hinar nas kiga, marcus mal zandari, marcus mal kikfar, marcus mal no sesno, ture marval kikvain. David eyed Cole. So you could have done this right from the beginning. Well, I can do a good job when I know the stakes. That's why I am an engineer, Cole said. Wait, he seemed to read something. Is this why you put me with Hearth? David walked over to look at the breakdown of the ritual he had made the night before. Yep, that's why Hearth was having you focus on the grip part of the muscle training. I need to bend an armband made of Xanfurium. Cole looked at the page again, one-handed. Yep, and if you don't, Kiga has a right to kill you. David thought about that part. Well, she probably wouldn't, but she could try to enforce it. I am a bit confused by something, Cole said as he started to think about his time with Kiga. Why am I doing this? I remember her saying that her family is meant to be a part of this ritual. Well, that part she wants you to do would normally be done by her father. However, he died during the Jackalo Suppression War, so she picked you. I recommend you ask her why. David said. Now come on, get going. We still have 2 more parts you need to memorize. David was about to turn in for the night. After such a long day of head-splitting annoyance, all he wanted was a good night of sleep. Just as he rolled over into his bunk and monotone let him know that there was someone at his door. With the little energy he had, he reached over to the terminal by his bed and looked through the camera. And to his surprise, it was the one person he wasn't expecting to see. Normally, the AI would tell him if someone wanted to speak to him or if he needed to be somewhere, but to have someone come find him was odd. David racked his brain to wake the hell back up. 1 second, I'll be right out, he said into the microphone. Scrambling to get back to his feet, he grabbed his undershirt he had just nearly torn apart and slid it back over himself. He jumped to his feet, only to trip over his boot and land with a thud. Gavi, can you raise the light level a bit, please? Now that he could see a bit, he realized how messy his cabin really was, having now been dressed, more sort of. He ran about his cabin, grabbing things to put away, organize, or hide in an out-of-sight place. He wasn't sure what his guest wanted, but it's good to make an impression of a sensible person. He stood straight up and looked around again. It was at least not a mess and was still clean. He walked over to the door and opened it. Hi, David said a bit out of breath. Sorry for the wait, I was about to go to bed. Alara stared at him for a second, then scanned him up and down. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I had messed up, she said, and sorry if I disrupted your sleep cycle. She seemed hesitant for a second. I wanted to speak with you privately. David, in a stunned haze, glanced down and stopped about a third of the way. Realizing that Alaris was not in her uniform, she was in something more akin to civilian clothes. Sure, come in, he said as he stepped aside and let her in. He watched as she carefully placed one of her digitigrade feet on the carpeted floor of his room and felt it for a second before walking in completely. "Here," he said as he pulled out his chair for her. "I'll seat on the bed." Alaris sat down, although not fully, in an effort to make room for her tail, and looked around the room like she was studying it. "So this is your den?" she mused aloud. "Are all the humans' dens decorated like this?" "Well, no, but as their leader I was allowed to bring some personal furniture, like the carpet and my desk," he said, as an unease leaned on his mind. "I wanted—" They both started together and inadvertently cut each other off. "Sorry," David quickly added. "I didn't mean to bring up painful memories. I assumed that your late-honored patriarch was just on a Zandra." He looked at her carefully. "You weren't wrong to ask," she said carefully, choosing her words. "It's just that I had misread the situation, and I panicked." "Alaris Hincarno panicked," David said in a cheerful tone, "that I would pay to see." He watched her for a bit as she gave a slight chuckle at his comment. "But what did you think the situation was?" She stopped and thought about it before getting up and taking a step away from him. "I thought you asked because you were seeing if I had a deeper connection with him." She took another step away. "I thought that maybe you wanted more from me than to be just crewmates." She began to hold on to herself. David watched her. All the evidence for her conclusion were there, and now he thought about it. Did he like her like that? Could he? David had fought alongside her kind. He once thought her people didn't have the emotional depth of humans. Alaris started to grip tightly onto her arms, her claws poking out a bit. "I thought that you may have wanted to build our connection deeper," she said through shaky breaths. "I thought you wanted to be my Mishra." She inhaled deep and hard. "Or my Pathrathin." David stood up. He wasn't sure if it was his sleep-deprived mind, his true feelings, or some misguided desire to finish his mission, but he had an answer for her. Consequences be damned. He stepped close and saw her ears twitch at the sound of soft footfalls. "Alaris," he said as he reached for her arm, "I know better than anyone how your kind sees the world." He came around and he pulled her hand free. "And I have a greater respect for your culture and ways than anyone not of your people could." He placed her hands on his chest, letting her sensitive paws feel his heartbeat. "But I can't convey my feelings the best way, and I am sorry." He slowly reached up one hand to her face and forced her eyes on his, her brilliant amber eyes. "I would be honored to be a part of your life, be it as you Mishra, Pathrathin, or Kusifane. I care about you deeply." Alaris's irises widened at his word, and her mind raced. "David, She hesitated, her eyes shying away from his. It looked like she was trying to quantify what he just said. She snapped her attention back to him. "I don't know what I can say." She bumbled through a few words. Her eyes closed tightly. "I have never had a Kusifane," she stammered. "But I know one thing." She pulled herself closer to him. "If I did, I would want it to be you," she said as she leaned to him and kissed him.